Okay, so The Gates by Christo and Jean-Claude. Um, some of this may be repeating if you were in fifth periods, repeating things you've already heard, but if you're in seventh period, it might be entirely new. So we can see that it's an installation in New York City. It was a temporary installation. It was actually only up for about a month or so, or it might have even just been 2 weeks. The slides will say it. And when you look at the dates, however, you might think 1979 and 2005 is certainly more than a couple months or a couple weeks. And the reason for that being that the process for them to make the gates and put up the gates began in 1979. Christo and Jean-Claude, and she died a few years ago, and he also recently died, which makes me very sad because they were a lot of fun. Um, uh, do not rely on any public funds whatsoever for any of their work. So they don't apply for any grants or anything like that. So what they do is they raise money for all of their works by selling drawings that Christo does of future works. So he makes these drawings of what the gates would look like when they happen, and he's able to sell them for good amount of money, and eventually raise the millions upon millions upon millions of dollars it takes to do these installations. I'll show you a few of their other installations as well. So that whole process began in 1979. So it's not only about the raising of the money, but it's also about getting approval from whatever government entity is going to be needed to be included in the process. So obviously they had to get approval from the city of New York. There is a great series of documentaries about their whole process, and there's one specifically about the gates that goes back to the 70s when they're first introducing this idea to the various, or the early 80s when they're first introducing this idea to the various city of New York officials, and it's very entertaining, and I highly recommend it if you're into this kind of thing. Anyway, so we can see it's throughout Central Park, right? These gateways, and these should remind you of Tory gates. I'll show you again what those look like in just a moment. With the fabric, this of course is going to blow in the wind. You're going to look at this and say orange. They were very clear on this not being called orange, but in fact being called saffron, probably to maybe connect to the robes of Buddhist monks, for example. Or different kinds of Eastern religious monks. I was lucky enough to actually be living in New York when this went up, and so it was very thrilling. They make these pieces, or the pieces actually go up through volunteer labor. So they get all these people to volunteer to put the things together, to make the things, to put things together, not to make the things, but to put the things together, monitor, et cetera, et cetera. So there are volunteers, but people are desperate to volunteer. I applied to volunteer. To be a volunteer, I was not accepted. All the materials after their exhibitions are done get recycled. So there's the emphasis on not having any kind of excessive waste at all. So I mentioned the Torii gates, and I think I showed you this picture before in relation to Ryoyan-ji with that Torii gate in the wet garden. And so we think of maybe very much of those Torii gates, and also very similar color in a lot of ways. So there were over 7,000 gates, over 23 miles of walkway. Each gate's 16 feet high. Obviously, the fabric goes down lower than that. And the widths would vary depending on the width of the path. So very specifically measured. It wasn't like, oh, we'll just make a bunch of gates and put them up, right? It had to very much go along with the actual plan of the park. So really integrating itself into the plan of the park. I took this picture and I was really proud of it, but it was on an early digital camera, so it's now really pretty crummy looking. So it was a very brief exhibition period. Okay, so it was only about 2 weeks, right? I thought it was longer for some reason. Felt longer because I went so often. So February 12th through the 27th. So we have the question, or one of the things, or a couple of things that the work addresses is, well, how do you make public art that's meaningful to people, that people can actually interact with, and also how do we do it in a way that actually involves the environment that we really truly live in. So the gates some people hated them, many people loved them. It brought millions and millions of dollars in the city from tourists. I had some friends who came up to visit just to go see the gates as well. But obviously, it thoroughly transformed the environment of Central Park for that brief 2-week period. It was also nice to see when it was very particularly cold and you had some ice and snow, and so that beautiful saffron colored fabric really stood out from the environment. Okay, this is the video that I mentioned in the Gates documentary. I can't show this to you right now, but I will put a link up to it, and if you're interested, you can watch it. It's very interesting. Christo and Jean-Claude are profoundly entertaining. So as a couple, they're just really a lot of fun. They were kind of lovely to watch together. So Christo is also known for wrapping the Reichstag and the Pont Neuf in Paris. He's done these wrapped islands. I don't. So he's known for this kind of very large scale, clearly large scale public. He did these umbrellas in Japan over here, and some valley in California over here. This is called Valley Curtain. So we see the kind of scale that we're dealing with here, that causes you to take note of your environment in a different way and to really enjoy your environment in a different way. I can't tell you how wonderful it was to walk through the park with those, curtains flying, and it was just wonderful. All right, so that's what I have for the gates. Again, with Global Contemporary, when I think about the works, like I said, are not very difficult with Global Contemporary, but we want to think about, okay, what's the effect on the viewer? That's always going to be a big issue. So what's the effect on the viewer here is to cause us to reevaluate and re-experience our environment in a new way, right? Evaluate and experience our environment in a new way. Okay, that's it in a very joyful way, right? Thank you.